You spent countless hours in the garage with your dad. Now investing in that old car and working on it with your son reminds you of him. And his legacy lives on. Fund your passion with a low-interest home equity line of credit from Bank of Blue Valley.
Oh, how are you doing, Will?
Scott, doing well. How about yourself?
Good. Erin said that she would have a punishment for me if I came into the picture. And so I listened to her. So I've listened to the request. But how are you doing? How is the start of 2023 for Bank of Blue Valley and Will?
It's great. Happy New Year to you. I think, what we're seeing a lot of here and what I imagine a lot of people are thinking about is New Year's resolutions. You want to get healthy. They want to start something new, and financial health is a big part of that, of resolutions. So our private bankers are working with our clients to try to make sure that they have the right plan in place for them, and would recommend anyone that has an interest of taking a look at their financial future to give us a call through our website, or you can find me online on LinkedIn.
That's right. I got my Bank of Blue Valley, and as you with the keen eye saw the Jayhawk there. But I don't know. I think it's a coincidence that Bank of Blue Valley has very similar colors. But one thing that's so unique that people don't realize is a lot of times we think of Bank of Blue Valley as a community bank that is helping people all throughout the metro. But you guys are doing some giant national and regional deals, and you have the capacity to work with anyone and everyone. And so, as that has changed, before we welcome our guests, how's that been with the economy kind of opening up from a more regional and national level for Bank of Blue Valley?
It's good for us, right? Because we can better serve our clients that have a larger geographic reach. We can write or give capacity for larger loans, which helps our clients as well. Limit to one bank to take care of all their needs. But although we have all those capabilities and we are larger, can do things more nationally, the one thing that hasn't changed is local decision making and being all about the community that we reside in, and that's not going to change for Bank of Blue Valley. So we're trying to keep the best of being the community bank and add in some capacity and capabilities to do things that the larger regional banks can do as well.
Yeah, I like it. So Erin one time logged in on my computer, so I don't know how to log off, but I can see everyone in the waiting room. And when you said local decision making, the guest that we're about to introduce, when I hear that amazing music that Erin doesn't like, nodded her head. And I think that's so huge for having those organizations. So without any further ado, someone that's 4 times well known as Will and I, Melissa Vincent.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on the show today.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
So one thing that Will and I were curious about is going to school on the East Coast and then finding your way and growing up through the ranks of business development. So give us the background of the origin story of Melissa.
Ooh, the origin story. Here we go. Oh, well, yes, I did grow up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, Amish country. And then I always feel this need to say, I am not Amish. Mm-hmm. Nothing against being Amish. I'm not Amish. I don't know why. I always have to plug that in there. Like, I'm not Amish, but I did
just
grow up.
Clarify, right?
Yes, I just feel the need to. So yeah, I grew up where there were like horse and buggies that still go up the street. And then ended up getting married and divorced, moving to Oklahoma. I mean, not at the same time, married, moved to Oklahoma, divorced. And that's how I got started in startups. I'd been in healthcare prior and had a friend of my ex-husband who was like, hey, we've got this startup. Why don't you just come work with us while you're kind of figuring out what you want to do in healthcare? And started there, and we sold that company, started another startup, stayed on with that, and then started my own startup. So my background's definitely a serial entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely love seeing something from the ground up, seeing it through to completion. And then after that, was recruited to come over to Pipeline. And I have been there. It is crazy to think this because it's been pandemic years, but I started in January 1st, 2020. And so I have been there through the entire pandemic, and I'm really excited to be back in person and getting back to a normal reality.
What a great time to start a new gig, right?
I know. Exactly. I'm like,
Perfect.
hey, everyone, I'm Melissa. Okay, well, now we're all going to only talk virtually.
Yeah. And so as Will asked the next question, I do need to bring up, we are lost without Aaron, but Paul Fogel is watching from LinkedIn. So it's kind of like Anchorman. If you write it, we'll probably read it. So it's a great shameless PR, but Paul is a great fan and is going to be coming on this show later this January. So Will, what is your entrepreneurial brain thinking to ask Melissa?
Well, no, in just doing some background, Melissa, what you do, I think it's a tremendous help for entrepreneurs that wear way too many hats and don't know all the resources that can be available to them. Could you kind of just tell us a little bit about Pipeline, the background, how your operating strategy, and then kind of the types of entrepreneurs? At what stage are you looking to help people? What does that come into play?
Absolutely. So Pipeline was started 15 years ago. Well, now it'll be 16 this year. And it was started around the idea that a lot of people in the Midwest, so we're Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, were having to leave the Midwest in order to raise capital, access resources. So we were losing people to the coast. So the idea was, if you bring those resources from the coast here, what impact would that have economically? And what happened was they created a program that initially was just a year-long intense business training, kind of what I would consider an accelerator. And after that, it was supposed to be you go through for a year and you're done. The people who were going through, the fellows that went through the program afterwards were like, well, we want to keep coming back. And so It went from initially just being a year-long program to being what it is today, which is a year-long fellowship program and a membership model after that. So after you go through your year-long program, then you become a member, and that stays for life. So you end up having, at this point, 200 members who have gone through the program. And for us, there's a few unique things when you're thinking about like who would be a Pipeline member. One is that they're a serial entrepreneur. So we want people who, if they start a company and they succeed, they're going to build another company. And if they start a company and fail, they're going to get right back up and start another company, because they're the ones who are creating the jobs. They're building, they're really the backbone of the economy. And then the other thing that we're looking for is later stage entrepreneurs. So we're past the idea phase. We have the company, we're making we're generating revenue, and we really want to scale. That's really where the traditional Pipeline was started. And really the goal was to help them scale, exit, and start another company. But what we realized and what we started last year was a second program. So the first time in 15 years, we created a second cohort, a second program. And that was for earlier stage entrepreneurs who came from underrepresented backgrounds, who were not yet working full-time on their startups. And our goal and our hope was, if we create an opportunity where we can give them access to resources earlier, and again, they're still serial entrepreneurs, just earlier stage, that we would be able to help them then get into the fellowship program. And you kind of create this continuum of care, right? So it's like early stage, you're in the program, a pathfinder, that's what we called it. And then you get into the fellowship. After the fellowship, you become a member. So really, we like just stay with you forever.
Yeah.
So that was the goal. And the success that the program has had is absolutely phenomenal, and has created so many jobs for the region, generated, an insane amount of revenue. And it's just an honor to get to lead such an awesome group.
Yeah, there was someone that just emailed me that is a past a member and an alumni, but if you had to share maybe 2 or 3 stories of your favorite exits of folks that really benefited from Pipeline, and not just people you've worked with in the last years, but just the history of the program, what can you share with the audience of companies of being in Pipeline and what they ended up doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a couple people there. So there's someone that I'll mention because I think he's been such a critical figure in the ecosystem, both from an entrepreneurial perspective, from a give back perspective. But Toby Rush, he went through the Pipeline program, was one of the original people to go through Pipeline, and he had a company called iVerify, and that company was sold. And he has just been, from someone who will mentor and, really give back. He's been just a phenomenal example of what Pipeline's about, like that heart to, be involved in the community and give back. And is that serial entrepreneur? I mean, he's always thinking of like, okay, what's he doing next and all those things. So he's a great example of someone who went through Pipeline and has been part of the program and continues to be very involved. Another person that went through the program is Maria Flynn, and she, huge shout out to her because she sold her company during the pandemic, which like the deep heart of the pandemic. And when you think about how hard it was just to hold your company together during the pandemic for a lot of business owners, and she was able to get her exit done during the pandemic, that's phenomenal. And then she went on to stay, again, very involved in the community. She went on to be a part of Techstars. She's now doing amazing things around helping other entrepreneurs actually try to get to a place where they could figure out how to sell their companies. So huge shout out to her because, I mean, that is not an easy task any day to sell a company. You do it during a pandemic. She's just phenomenal.
I feel like you and Maria are very similar. You're like everywhere all the time. And then funny enough, I was at a meeting today for lunch with a gentleman named Grant Gordon. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing the company. So it's like Celerity Enterprises.
Oh yeah, Celerity. Yeah.
Celerity. Sorry. That's why when Aaron puts up the comments, Will reads them because the dyslexic me, I'm not very good at it. But he literally said he was put together by Toby Rush to help grow this company.
Yeah.
So it's a great example of things that are cooking. So, Will, as Aaron throws those up, feel free to read.
Yep. Well, so Melissa, one thing I maybe jumped the gun a little bit too much because we have a wide variety of entrepreneurs that are in various stages of their venture. Could you talk a little bit about Pipeline? Because I don't think people really understand what that is and what it, what a pipeline does, right? So
right.
Could you speak a little bit to that just to help educate the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times I think that there's this interesting, what is pipeline question. And as an organization, I think we're always trying to grapple with the best way to describe ourselves. Most people would consider us, like when you think about incubators and accelerators, you would think of us as an accelerator because we're coming in to provide resources, access to capital, mentorship, programming for someone who's building their company. The reason why we typically do not refer to ourselves as that is because we don't take equity in the companies that we work with. And that's very different than a typical incubator accelerator. So we are founder first. So what we care about is that serial entrepreneur, not necessarily. Now you have to have a really strong company to get into the program, but we care more about the entrepreneur. And so we don't take equity in the companies that we serve. And so what they do is they go through a year-long program, and then they have access to, they're provided with mentors, they have access to professional development, but the programming itself is kind of what makes Pipeline. So we bring in the most amazing module leads, and they go through 4 modules a year. So there's 1 a quarter, and they are there for 3 days. They're super intense. The whole point of those modules is to really break down your company, get to the heart of where the issues are, and then build it back up in the 3-day period. And then they're all around how to scale your company. Because again, we're past that stage of like putting together the company. So it's really all about how do I better scale my company? And when you think about the organization being around for so long, and you think about people like Toby Rush and Maria Flynn who've gone through the program, you have the benefit of having those people being involved in your startups being built out as mentors and just, you know, people who are involved in the program. Think about how many mistakes that you can avoid when you have access to people who have done this multiple times very successfully. Just the power of that, minus the world-class training that they get for that year, minus the access to resources, minus the mentorship, minus, you know, access to connections to capital. Take away all those things. Just being able to learn from people who have done it so successfully and can say, do this, not that. Talk to this person, make this connection. The power and the value of network is something that, you know, is just a critical element to what we provide. But really, when most people think of it, it's going through that fellowship year. And we take 13 people who have companies, so 13 founders a year through that fellowship program. And then the same now with Pathfinder. There's 13 that go through the program a year. And so we are actually right now this week, so tomorrow and Wednesday, I will be in semifinal interviews of the people who have like made it through the first batch of like kind of applications and interviews. So they'll go through semifinal interviews. And then next week I'll be in Kansas City for final round interviews, which are in person. And out of that selection process, we'll pick 10 to 13. It's, in my mind, always 13, but 13 people who will go through that year-long program this year.
Got it. No, I'm sure that's decisions that are tough to make and you don't take lightly. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
Will, I love how you're keeping everything on track with being like, hey, wait a second, what are we talking about here? So as you're on a roll, keep with the and I know you just had another question to interrupt.
I think Aaron, Aaron has a question for us to ask from for Melissa. All right. How did your entrepreneurial mindset show up when you were young? Were you always that kid who was looking for ways to expand the typical childhood jobs, mowing, babysitting, etc.? So what was it?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is going to be the weirdest answer, but it'll tell you a lot about me. When I look back at it, for me, yes, I did all those things like the babysitting and, you know, all of that. However, I was obsessed with the show MacGyver. You guys remember MacGyver, like the old school one? And what I loved about it was his problem-solving ability. And honestly, that is what it takes to be a really good entrepreneur. Your ability to stay calm under pressure, solve a problem, duct tape whatever you need to together. And then I didn't actually realize that I was an entrepreneur until I had to see like a little bit of a pattern. So I mentioned I was in healthcare. What I didn't mention is that even in that, I started a 10-bed geriatric psychiatric unit for people with dementia from the ground up. And I loved it. And I thought, well, the thing that I love about this must be healthcare. And then when I moved to Oklahoma and got involved in startups, what I realized was it wasn't that it was in healthcare, although that was great. It was the fact that I got to see something, build it, put it together. And that's the part that I really love, is that building, that creating process. Yep. And so, yes, it was there. I think it's really the problem solving and the putting together. And now I get to do that in a different way. Now I get to do that in building a community. And so at the end of the day, I'm really a builder.
Yeah, great answer. Let's see. So what are the requirements for a company to get into that fellowship program? From Dan here.
Hey, Dan, thanks so much. So the requirements, there's two different sets. So if you are looking to be in the fellowship program, you do have to be working on your startup full time. Outside of that, it's what we're really looking for is the serial entrepreneur piece. So for anyone who's listening who wants to apply for next year, since applications are closed now, one of the questions that will always come up, and for those who may be listening who are about to go through interviews this week and next, the question will come up about, well, if this company is successful and it sells, what are you going to do? And what we love to hear is, oh, well, I have like 2 other ideas for a startup that I want to do, or like I want to give back. So what we're really looking for are people who are at, we're trying to build leaders and people who are going to give back both to creating another company, but also to their community. So what we're really looking for are companies that founders working full time, you have revenue, you're trying to scale and get to that next level. And to be clear, you don't have to have a company that you're looking to exit. A lot of our members have amazing companies that they are doing and generating crazy amounts of revenue and aren't planning to exit. So it doesn't have to be an exit story. It's just that that's where a lot of serial entrepreneurs are focused because they want to have, here's the next thing that I'm going to build and do. So you have to be there. You have to be scaling your company. And then really it's just, you have to be in Kansas, Nebraska, or Missouri. And then you apply. We always start our applications in September. This year they went till Thanksgiving. So we try to give people plenty of time, especially because we have 2 programs now. And then from there, you go through the interview process to get in, and we take 10 to 13 a year. And then for Pathfinder, it is much earlier. So you have to be not working on your startup full time, have a full-time job. You have this startup idea that you have, it's off the ground. You've started it. It can't be like just an idea, but you're not able to work on it full time. And our hope and our goal is that we'll be able to get you to a place by giving you all those resources where you can actually run your company full time and then get into the fellowship.
Yeah.
So
Dan,
Melissa,
go ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say, so when you talk about some of the scaling process, what percentage of the time the scaling equate to funding needs? Like how much of that conversation are you helping people with, and who maybe aren't quite ready for the bank yet, but need some investment of some sort?
So so what I would say with that is, what we're trying to really help them figure out is, do they need, to get venture capital? Do they need PE? Do they need angel investment? And if so, a lot of them have already, when they're in the fellowship, they've already got a seed round that's done. Some of them have been, are pretty close to a Series A. So that's kind of where they are in like the funding life cycle. And some of them haven't. I mean, we've had people go through who have never had to raise capital because they've just been able to bootstrap it. And that's, their path.
Yep.
For our Pathfinder program, it's a little bit different. That is something that we're really actually working very strategically to try and figure out what funding mechanisms can we bring in, because they are earlier stage. And, one of the things, again, and this is the power of having a whole network of people who've gone through the program, a lot of times, I think as entrepreneurs, we think, oh, I have to raise capital. And to your point, there's banking options. There's, there are so many different ways that you can fund your startup that don't require you to give up equity. And so we want to make sure that we're, especially from a Pathfinder perspective, where you're just in the beginning stages of figuring out, how to fund this thing that you want to do full time, that we're making sure that everyone's looking at every option versus just saying, because that's what we hear, that you have to raise capital.
Yep. So because you've mentioned it a couple of times, subtly, which is to be more blatant with things, not having to give up equity, big difference that you can provide versus maybe some other pipelines in the Midwest. For those that aren't aware of it, maybe you can talk to your uniqueness and why they should be giving you a call.
Yeah. So when you think about, one, I'm a big fan of, there aren't enough resources for entrepreneurs in the Midwest, or, especially in the heartland, right? Mm-hmm. And so I always feel like if there's a program that you can get into and it's a good program, you should try to get into it. And so I'm very much not like, oh, pipeline's the only path. I think if you can do multiple programs, by all means you should, because the more that you can absorb and be a sponge and take in and get access to, the better. That being said, there are really great programs out there that typically, because what they're doing is they're linking their programming to, they're going to connect you to investors, and that's where that equity exchange takes place. Whereas we have other ways of making connections to investors and, again, additional non-traditional forms of investment vehicles. But we are more about that entrepreneur scaling versus tying that to, well, you have to raise capital. And so it allows us, in my opinion, to be a little bit more agnostic. So we don't focus on one industry. So a lot of people think of like Techstars. They're very focused on like tech-based, whereas we're not. We're agnostic. That doesn't mean that most of our companies are tech in some way, tech-enabled of some kind, but we don't have to. So we have an amazing company called Sapan that's all about providing amazing luxury handbags that are ethically sourced from these women in Thailand. So, I mean, and so there's just so many different things that with Pipeline, we're agnostic. So we don't have to be like focused just on one industry or one, channel for funding.
I think you are alluding to something I just wasn't aware of, but what you're saying part of it about being agnostic, when you're looking at funding, you want everyone to look at everything. Like, and I'm not just saying this because the sponsor is on the show and I'm wearing the clothing, but like a Bank of Blue Valley,
yes.
For everyone, do you evaluate saying, hey, why not just get a loan with Bank of Blue Valley? Because you don't need to give up equity because you have a reason to get a loan. So is that part about being agnostic?
Yes, that's exactly it. Our hope is that what we're really doing is educating to say, sometimes raising capital and going the traditional, venture capital route, sometimes that's great. Sometimes that works depending on your goals. But a lot of times for the entrepreneurs that we're seeing, that's not the best path, or maybe that's not the only path. And so we want to make sure that we're really educating our fellows and members and community on places like Blue Valley. So that way we're saying, you should be looking at every option out there, not just the ones that you've heard about.
Well, there's someone in the comments section that Aaron may pull up, but Dan, who made the comment earlier to explain the program, one time got obsessed. He said, amazing answer, and I absolutely love what you do. I love the concept of Pathfinder. You gained a new #1 fan.
Yay!
So Dan is an entrepreneur to the core, to the point where he got excited working on a problem over a weekend that was really hard to solve, but he liked it because there was a barrier of entry for anyone else to get into what he's doing. So I think it's very similar to the folks that you're looking for. And so, Will, as your wheels are turning, I'm curious if, the questions you have for Melissa, but also I'm assuming that Bank of Blue Valley works with folks like Melissa all the time when they have entrepreneurs that need help on the funding side. But as we close out this last question, what are you thinking?
No, I think it's we're like a great complement in a way, because, we're regulated. There's certain fair lending and things that restrict what banks can do, even when they are all behind the idea that they believe in the founder, they believe in the team, but regulation gets in the way. So when you can have someone with Melissa's expertise come in and say, look, that you're not quite there yet, here's some alternatives to help you get there in the future, or to keep the ball moving, that's the best case for the company. So I think that what she does is so important, and a great compliment, because when we can't do something yet, we like to have somewhere we can turn people to keep their options, or help them learn what their options may be.
So no one likes some people hate New Year's resolutions. Some people like them. Erin's going to kick me. She's like, why is he asking that question? But we'll go ladies first. Melissa, what is your New Year's resolution? If you have them, maybe you don't.
So for me, it's actually not a resolution. It's just a word. One of my friends, I'll give a shout out to, Andre Davis with Built, was asking me. Yes, we all know and love that. Who does not love Andre Davis? There's no one. He was like, what's your word for the new year, Melissa? And I was like, that is such an Andre thing to ask. So I had to think about it. So while I don't have a resolution, I do have a word, and it's balance.
Okay. Will, with 30 seconds left, what is
I was just there. Are we out of time? Come on.
Yeah.
My resolution is to stutter less when I'm speaking with you on these calls. That's my goal, is to cut down on my uhs and all that fun stuff.
Well, I think you do a phenomenal job today.
I was gonna say I didn't hear a single so.
Well, I didn't say I was making a tough goal. I was
Well, you ran the show. Well,
yeah.
huge thank you to Bank of Blue Valley and Burns and McDonnell's for being such amazing fans of Kansas City and the Midwest and helping build companies. And Melissa, thank you so much for coming on the show to kick off the year with Bank of Blue Valley and Burns and McDonnell. So we're going to wave at the camera and Aaron's going to start it off.
Thank you,
Great
guys.
job, Melissa.